Here we have another one of our mince recipes. This one requires a little bit more effort, but we've simplified all the stages to make it easy for you. We're going to make a beef and spinach lasagna, and the first part of that dish is the meat and tomato sauce. For that, you need 450 grams or a pound of lean steak mince. You'll also need 2 400-gram cans of chopped plum tomatoes. We also have 1 onion finely diced. We have 1 dessert spoon of tomato puree, and we have 1 tablespoon of garlic granules. You could, of course, use fresh garlic for this, and maybe 1 clove crushed would do. For the second part of our recipe, we need to make a spinach and ricotta sauce. For that, you'll need 250 grams of spinach, 250 grams of ricotta, 100 grams of creme fraiche, and nutmeg to grate into the mixture. The final part of the recipe is the pasta. Here we have sheets of fresh lasagna. You could equally use dried lasagna, but you would have to adjust the cooking time for a little bit longer. To finish the dish, we'll be using some Parmesan cheese, and that'll be grated on the top to allow it to go for a lovely brown colour. So let's get on with the first part of the lasagna, and we'll make the meat and tomato sauce. First of all, I'll move some things out of the way. For this recipe, you'll want to use a heavy-based saucepan. It doesn't have to be a frying pan shaped like this. You can actually use a high-sided dish. High-sided pan, it will do the same job. Put your hob on to a high temperature and allow the pan to heat up. For this recipe, you could use low-fat spray oil, vegetable oil, ground nut oil, or any oil you want to, but I'm going to use olive oil. I'm going to use 2 dessert spoons. Allow that to heat a little bit, and then we'll add in the mince. Now that the oil's warm enough, we're going to add in the diced onion, and then we're also going to add in the garlic. We want to cook these for a couple of minutes so that the onion becomes translucent, but not so that it's taking on really any browning in colour. This recipe can also form the basis of a spaghetti bolognese. We're not going to cook this sauce for very long, only about 5 minutes, because the cooking will be completed within the oven. If you cook this sauce for maybe another 20-30 minutes, you can use it as a spaghetti bolognese and just serve with some lovely pasta. Once the onions have become translucent, you can then add in the beef. And as you add it in, break up the beef with a wooden spoon. Once the beef's in the pan, again, keep breaking it up into smaller pieces as the meat's browning. For this recipe, you want all the meat to be brown before you add in any of the other elements of the sauce, before you add in the tomato puree or the tinned tomatoes. Once all the meat is sealed, it doesn't have to be dark brown, just so that there's no pink left on the meat, so all the juices are sealed into the meat. You can then get on with adding all your other ingredients. Here we're going to add our 2 cans of chopped tomatoes and our dessert spoon of tomato puree. Mix this all up thoroughly. So that the tomatoes and the tomato puree are dispersed through the meat. And at this point, it's a good point to add a little bit of seasoning, some pepper, lots of freshly ground black pepper, and a little bit of salt. You can always add more salt later. It's better to add less when you're cooking it. We'll leave this to cook for another 5 minutes until the sauce reduces down, and then we'll remove from the heat and get on with the ricotta and spinach sauce. So we've made our first stage of the lasagna. We've made the meat and tomato sauce, and it's cooked for 5 minutes, and it's been set aside to cool. In the meantime, We've taken 250 grams of spinach like this and washed it in cold water and then drained it. You then should put the spinach directly into a pan and wilt it, and you're left with spinach that looks like this. What we're now going to do is chop the spinach, and we're going to make our spinach and ricotta sauce. So lift the spinach and squeeze out as much water as possible by hand. You can see it's important to do this as a lot of water comes out of that small amount of spinach. I'm then going to just roughly chop the spinach. You don't need to be too precise here, just enough so it will disperse evenly through the sauce. We'll then put the spinach in the bowl, like that, and we'll take our other ingredients. Here I have 250 grams of ricotta cheese, which should just go in the bowl with the spinach. And then 100 grams of creme fraiche, again, which should just go straight into the bowl. What we'll then do is add some seasoning, some salt, and some freshly ground black pepper. And then we'll add a grating of nutmeg. You can add as much or as little nutmeg as you like. A few gratings should be enough. But if you like the taste, you can always add more. Using a wooden spoon, mix the spinach, ricotta, and creme fraiche thoroughly. Try and remove any big lumps and get everything combined. When you're finished, your mixture should look something like this.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks.
Now that we've made the sauce, we can get on with layering up the lasagna. We now have all our component parts of our lasagna ready. Before we put anything together, you need to preheat the oven to 180 degrees Celsius, gas mark 4, or if you have a fan-assisted oven, turn it down to about 160 degrees. We have our mince and tomato sauce, which we made earlier. We put all the parts together, and then we cooked for about 5 minutes and set aside to cool. We have a ricotta and spinach sauce here, which we made simply by mixing all the ingredients together. We also have fresh lasagna sheets, and we have some Parmesan cheese to finish. Get out a baking tray and get an oven-proof dish and sit it on top. This will be your lasagna dish. Start by taking a couple of spoonfuls of your tomato and mince mixture and spread it on the bottom of your lasagna dish. These layers don't need to be too thick because the thinner you make them, the more layers you can get in. Do try and make it even though. On top of that first layer of mince, take a sheet of lasagna. As I said earlier, you can use dried lasagna, but I'm using fresh here. And check that it's going to fit into the size of dish you're using. Thankfully, mine does. But if it hadn't, you can simply snip it with some scissors. We're then going to add in a layer of our spinach and ricotta sauce on top of the lasagna. And again, spread evenly inside the dish. A little more. This is really a cheats way of making lasagna because you can also make it using a bechamel sauce with cheese added. But this is much quicker and much more family friendly. Once you've added your cheese layer, then add another layer of mince and follow this process until your dish is full. This recipe will actually serve 6, but the dish that I'm using here, it has about 3 portions in it. Then before we put it in the oven, finish with some Parmesan cheese. This will just go golden on top of the dish and melt nicely into the lasagna. Just going to take a cloth and wipe away these extra bits here on the side because these will burn. And then we'll transfer this to the oven, which we've preheated at 180 degrees for about 45 minutes, or until the pasta is tender. It'll be ready once the pasta's tender and the cheese on the top's golden brown and bubbling. So our lasagna's been in the oven for 35 minutes. Let's have a look and see how it's getting on. As you can see, the cheese sauce is all melted and the parmesan has gone golden brown, so that's our lasagna cooked. Serve simply with salad. This portion would serve 3 people.